Let me tell you something. For nearly 2 decades, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has remained one of the most disturbing and controversial missing person cases in modern history. A 3-year-old girl vanishes from a holiday apartment in Portugal, and yet, after years of investigation, global media attention, political involvement, and millions spent, there is still no definitive answer. No body, no murder scene, no confirmed abductor, and no evidence proving what really happened. But what there is suspicion. Suspicion surrounding timelines, suspicion surrounding behaviour, suspicion surrounding statements, and suspicion surrounding a sequence of events that many people don't believe add up. Why were the parents themselves named as suspects? Why were specialist UK blood cadaver dogs indicating at areas they shouldn't have been, including that of Madeleine's favourite teddy, Cuddle Cat? Why would an alleged kidnapper take only one child and leave the twins behind? Why did some interviews from a mother have so many no comments as a response? Why did the case so quickly escalate to involve both the British Prime Minister and the Pope? And why, despite admitting leaving the children alone, were 2 highly educated medical professionals never charged with child neglect in either country? Today's podcast isn't about declaring guilt as fact. It's about asking difficult questions, exploring contradictions, looking at evidence, theories, behaviour, and possibilities. Because at the centre of all this, a child's disappeared, and after all these years, the world still doesn't know why.
What if everything you think you know about reality is wrong? What if the glitches, the mysteries, and the unanswered questions are clues from conspiracies and the paranormal to science, consciousness, and the possibility we're living in a simulation? This is the One Opinion in 8 billion podcasts. Every week, we dive into the biggest mysteries of our world. Subscribe now and be a part of the discussion. Question everything. Nothing is off limits.
Welcome everyone to another podcast of One Opinion in 8 billion. Today, if you haven't already realised, we're going to be talking about Madeleine McCann and the suspicions surrounding her disappearance. So today, in true format, I'm going to be discussing the case and the things that I think are a little bit unusual, the cause of what's created the suspicions, especially around the parents. I'm going to be looking at a channel that gives 5 facts on the case, just to help people go out there and investigate or research themselves. At the end of it, a child's missing. It's I can't imagine anything worse. Having your child go missing and not know where they are. But the problem is that the behaviour of 2 professionals was very cold, I really don't know how to put it in words. I mean, a lot of people would argue they've just had their child go missing. They'd be in shock. They'd be unconsolable, some would say. That being said, they are both medical professionals. There's lots of people think that doctors are immune to bad news, and that maybe they're cold in general in terms of their response, most people's responses to difficult situations. All of this is possible. Everything I tell you today could have a very logical answer. But as I've spoke about before, when it comes to conspiracy theories or things just not adding up, even when it's suspicious, coincidental, it's when they stack up. That's when it becomes to get a bit. And I think that's the problem in this particular case, is there's so many inconsistencies. There's so many narratives that they just don't add up, and it's easier when a narrative becomes available that makes more sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch, it's only a short video, and I'm going to stop in between giving my version of things from my book, and my own personal thoughts behind the case. It is a case that I've monitored closely. I don't know if it's because I'm a parent. There's millions of parents out there. I think when this first happened, the same as a lot of the things that I discuss in my book and on this podcast, it's my initial gut feeling that it just doesn't make sense. And I think that's the key. It just doesn't make sense what's being portrayed. So therefore, people come up with their own theories. They do their own investigations. They look at the smallest of little details. That's where it becomes problematic, is when you start looking at the very fine details and things just aren't working out. Now, when I show these videos and stuff like that, yes, it doesn't paint a great picture because it is showing all of the things that are just out of this world. So I understand that there are people out there that will go, oh, they're just showing you all the bits they wanted to show you. Very similar to what I say in my book about misinformation and, only being shown what you want to be shown by whoever, me in this case, to solidify what I'm saying. Nothing in this is definitive. It's not fact. There's no there is facts, but there's no fact proving to a guilt or to a conclusion of what happened. This is purely my personal opinion and taking in a few bits of information from other sources to why I've come to that conclusion, or that kind of narrative that fits in my mind better than the one that we all know.
Sweet. It's going to be 5 interesting facts about the case that are either backed up by the Portuguese police files or by Jerry and Kate McCann themselves. And of course, it goes without saying, I'm not accusing the McCanns of anything, just merely stating facts from the Portuguese police files or from things that Jerry or Kate have said themselves in interviews. If you have any other interesting facts or would like me to do more videos on this topic or even a story format of the Madeleine McCann case, let me know because, this one I find particularly interesting. Fact number 1. 13 hours after Madeleine McCann went missing, her mother, Kate McCann, told a social worker that a couple had abducted her daughter. Yvonne Martin was a social worker and had worked in child protection for over 25 years, so she felt obliged to offer the McCanns her support. The document you're about to see is directly from the Portuguese police files. The social worker, Yvonne Martin, met the McCann couple next to the apartment from where the child had disappeared. They were accompanied by a third person, a male, who we now know to be David Payne, one of the Tapas 7. Yvonne Martin identified herself and presented her credentials to the McCanns and immediately began talking to Kate McCann. During the conversation with Kate McCann, Kate told her that she did not understand why a couple had abducted her daughter. Yvonne Martin found this very strange that Kate told her that her daughter had been taken by a couple when at the time there was absolutely no evidence to suggest this. So she tried to separate her from Jerry McCann and David Payne so she could speak with her by herself, as Kate was the only person saying that a couple had taken Madeleine. It was at this point that David Payne overheard, interrupted the conversation and ushered Kate and Jerry away. He then told Yvonne Martin that the couple did not want any help from her. Fact 2.
So there we go. There's the first fact on this particular podcaster. She is called The Raven's Room. Her podcasts are really good. They're all about bizarre things and lots of murder cases and things like that. So if you're not already, go to her page, subscribe, and let me know what you think of her stuff, because I think it's really good. Now, You know, a lot of people would say that a social worker being immediately available in this particular instance would be a saving grace. You know, someone that's very experienced, and if nothing else, could offer support, because, you know, social workers are involved in all sorts of different areas of family upset, child welfare. So why would you not want to completely take advantage of that? The other thing that's interesting in that particular thing is where she's mentioning a couple. Kate McCann is mentioning that a couple has abducted her child. Well, this is 13 hours after the event. Nobody knows what's happened. You know, even if we knew now, the likelihood is then we wouldn't have known within 13 hours of the incident. The other interesting thing to point out is that it was automatically declared as a kidnapping almost straight away, you know, immediately from the incident occurring, when Kate McCann went to the room on one of the checks and found Madeleine to be missing. So, you know, this is the first thing for me, that one of the friends ushers Kate away and basically says, we don't want any help. And I mean, who wouldn't want that help? So that already doesn't look good. But, you know, let me know what you guys think, and maybe you'll have a different opinion.
Jerry McCann, Madeleine McCann's father, used distancing language when talking about Madeleine to other people very shortly after his daughter went missing. For example, this is a statement from Pamela Fenn from the Portuguese police files. Pamela Fenn lived in the apartment directly above the apartment the McCanns were staying in. After Madeleine went missing, she leaned over her terrace as she heard a bit of a ruckus going on down below. Pamela Fenn asked Jerry McCann, Madeleine's dad, what was happening, to which he replied that a small girl had been abducted. She found it strange that when mentioning a girl had been abducted, Jerry hadn't mentioned that it was his daughter, and he did not mention any other scenarios. For example, he didn't say, my daughter's missing, or I don't know where my daughter is, please help find my daughter. Instead, it was just a girl. Fact 3.
Okay, so there's fact number 2. You know, these aren't suspicions. These aren't, you know, this isn't false information. This is directly from the Portuguese witness testimonies. Now, this is weird, right? I mean, if your daughter's, I mean, I appreciate being a doctor, cold. Some people don't show emotions. You could be in shock. But surely, with all that, you would still be hyperventilating, you would be distressed, you would be pleading and asking for help with anyone. You probably wouldn't be able to really concentrate at all. So for the natural response to be, a girl's being kidnapped, rather than my daughter is missing, because we don't know it's a kidnap, my daughter is missing, or I can't find my daughter, have you seen her? Can you please help me? Because you wouldn't care who helped you at that point. Any help would be appreciated. You would be in such a frantic, you know, you're not just, the child's not just missing. You're in a foreign country, there's a language barrier, it's night time, and you just don't know where your firstborn child is. You would be absolutely frantic, would you not? Let me know what you guys think and we'll move on.
The answer that Jerry McCann gives to "Did you kill your daughter?" in a TV interview was heavily edited, so people believe that this version is the real version.
Did you kill your daughter?
No, that's an emphatic no. I mean, the ludicrous thing is what's been purported from Portugal is that Madeleine died in the apartment by an accident and we hid her body. Well, when did she have the accident and died? Because the only time she was left unattended was when we were at dinner. So if she died then, how could we have disposed or hidden her body, when there was an immediate threat. It's just nonsense. So, and if she died when we were in the apartment or fell and did something, why would we cover that up?
However, this is the unedited, raw footage of his response to that question.
Did you kill your daughter?
No, never. And, there's nothing with any logic that could, you would have to start with why, how, when, who, and there's just simply, the answer to any of these things is there's nothing to suggest anything. So, no, that's an emphatic no.
This is an email conversation between myself and a journalist who reported Jury's true response in a podcast called Maddie. I highly recommend listening to it, it's really good. But he basically states in this that he didn't edit the footage or the audio, in this case, in any way, shape or form. So for anyone who thinks that the actual raw footage is the edited version, I hate to break it to you, but you're wrong. Fact 4.
What did you think of that? Even like me doing these podcasts, there's editing involved to make sure that you're not boring the viewer, to make sure that you're happy with everything, everything's included that you want to include. But when you see edits, even in the one that was broadcasted, when he's asked the question of did you kill your daughter? Why would you smirk? Even if it was ludicrous, which we all know it's not as ludicrous as it seems, because there's many people out there that are parents that have killed their children for a number of different reasons, purposely or accidentally. So we know it happens, right? But, when you look at the unedited version, they're both smiling and kind of laughing about it. And honestly, I don't think any of it's a laughing matter. I'd be furious. I'd be so angry. There would definitely be no smile on my face. There would definitely be no smirking. Even 20 years, 30 years after, I would not be smiling. I would not be smirking. I would be frowning and angry and talking quickly and definitively saying it's preposterous. Then you see Kate McCann, a zoom in on her eyes, and it just looks like guilt. This is another thing that's always been said throughout, especially the early days. That they both, it doesn't look like sorrow or grief, it looks like guilt. It looks like what the suspicions are, that there's something more to this, and technically, me included, I don't think the McCanns killed Madeleine. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think that's the discrepancy. I don't think anybody generally believes that they directly had a cause to her death if she is dead or did die. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is did an accident occur, which was also briefly mentioned, which I will go on to in a little bit. But so they're technically not lying. They didn't kill her. So in essence, that is true. I find that very hard to believe. And like Kate said, one of them said then that when would they have time to do it? And it's all very conveniently and stagedly said, scripted, sort of. Why? When would it have happened? Well, there's a massive discrepancy over the timelines. So with how corrupted the crime scene was, is it unplausible to think that an incident's occurred, they've gone back, Madeleine McCann's not breathing, they've panicked, put her in the cupboard or something like that, caused all the drama, and then moved her during, one could have moved her maybe very quickly before anybody else came. There's a bit of a grey area on those particular timings. if the friends are, if the timelines are wrong as they are stated by them and their friends on checking of the children, etc., then, or being lied about, then is it unplausible to think that they'd lie about the rest of it? So Jerry McCann, there was an eyewitness that's seen someone that looked very much like Jerry McCann holding a child, a lifeless child, could have been sleeping, but lifeless nevertheless. Same pajamas, described as what she was wearing. So that's a bit odd. And that could have easily been, say, Jerry McCann moving Madeleine whilst everything's going on. And then Jerry comes back and then, the alarm goes off. These are the finer details that, unless you were there, that are very hard to specifically find. But nevertheless, I wouldn't be smirking and I wouldn't be laughing about, one, my child being missing still, with no definitive answers, no definitive clues, no real direction. It's almost as good as a cold case is going to get. And I just don't know why you'd be laughing about it. I just don't. A part of you is gone forever by all accounts. Let me know what you guys think and we'll move on.
Probably the most unbelievable of all of the facts is that Kate says they never physically searched for their daughter, in her own words.
And I've spoken to a lot of people over the weeks, local people who'd given up a lot of time. You've talked about the support that they've given you. I met people who didn't go to work for more than a week because every day they were down on the beach searching the streets. Did you, as a mother, Kate, just sometimes think, I've got to go and be out there with them, I want to go and just physically look as well?
I mean, I did. We've been working really hard, really. Apart from the first 48 hours, as Jerry said, were incredibly difficult and we were almost non-functioning, I'd say. But after that, you get strength from somewhere. We've certainly had loads of support and that's given us strength. And it's been able to make us focus, really. So we have actually, in our own way, it might not be physically searching, but we've been working really hard and doing absolutely everything we can, really, to get Madeleine back.
There's not really much else to say about that one. Straight from the horse's mouth. Fact 5.
You didn't search for your own child that's missing? Really? I don't think there is a person, an organisation, or anything that would stop me looking for my own child. They say that if this is a kidnapping, that the first 24 to 48 hours are crucial. I mean, in realistic terms, that's the case in any investigation. Every second that goes by is a potential chance of, or step further away from finding the truth, the answers, or the person unharmed. So, really? I mean, there really isn't much more to say on that. Like she says in, the podcaster, from the horse's mouth. I have literally no other words that I can possibly say on it. So let's move on. By the way, guys, just before we do, if you are enjoying my stuff, I'd really appreciate giving us a like and a subscribe. It is free, doesn't cost you anything, and I'd really appreciate you helping me out. So let's move on.
Mitchell was the spokesperson for the McCanns, and he actually stated that none of the Tapas 7 were wearing watches or had their phones with them that night at dinner. Meaning, how did any of them actually know times, or even approximate times, of when they were leaving the table, going for checks, when dinner was, what was going on at what time? It's impossible to know that without actually having a watch or a phone. And that just seems so bizarre that 9 people in total, including Jerry and Kate, none of them had a phone or a watch or knew what time it was. This is taken directly again from the Portuguese police files, and it states here that Clarence Mitchell, the McCann spokesperson, confirmed in an interview, "You had 9 people in a bar without watches on, without mobile phones, and absolute panic set in when they realised what had happened." So he confirms this. I just find that so weird. Thanks for watching, guys.
There you go, guys. It's the end of the video. I told you it was a short one. So the reason I showed that was because, I mean, there's thousands of videos I could have shown. But I came across that one, and it was just 5 very interesting facts from either the McCann's mouths themselves on interviews, or from the actual Portuguese investigation directly on witness statements surrounding the case. So, as I said before, I am trying to do shorter podcasts, but I am a chatterbox. You know, I am new to this. I am trying to get it run smoother and more consistent in terms of the lengths. But everything I'm trying to do, everything I'm trying to achieve isn't linear. There is no definitive. Some things I know more information about, some things I feel more passionately about, but I don't want to bore the audience, and it's very hard to try and find where that line is. So anyway, I'm going to give a quick rundown of my version of events, starting with that last scene, which is the fact that none of the party, 9 in total, with the McCanns, had watches or phones. Now, yeah, it looks odd. It looks a little bit... There could have been a clock, you know, big clock in the restaurant. So, I'm not a massive thing of that one. However, timing for me is one of the most crucial pieces in this particular case. The party have said that every 30 minutes they went to check on their children. Now, it's unclear whether or not on each occasion they would check on all of the children and come back, or not. So let's just say that they're only checking on their own. The distance from the restaurant to the McCann's apartment, for instance, there's a pool in between the apartment blocks and the restaurant. So let's just say that 10 minutes to get up, walk across, check, and come back. So if they're checking on their children every 30 minutes, bearing in mind we don't know, like I said, if they were checking on their own. We know that on some instances they did check on others, that we've heard from statements, but it's unclear as to the specifics. So we don't actually know how long Madeleine McCann, specifically in the twins, were left unattended directly, or how long the gap was between the intervals of them being seen. So it is very hard to identify, specify, or even speculate. But we're going on what the party have said, including the McCanns themselves. So are we to believe that every sort of 15, 20 minutes with the rotations to make it the half an hour with the time lapse doing the checks are getting up? They've all left their children unattended. If that happened in the UK and was found out, both police and social services would certainly be involved. Even more so with them being very young infants. 3 of them, in the McCann's case, under the age, 3 or under. Sidestep that one for a second. So you're in a restaurant, you're having a really good time, you've done it loads of times before, everything's been fine, the likelihood of anything going wrong is very, very, very minimal. Checking every half an hour? I don't believe that. The first night, maybe. it's more plausible. But, you know, they've done this for several nights now, admitting once again that they've all left their children unattended, underage. They're not even anywhere close, you know, as they should be under law. And would they be getting up every 30 minutes, 20 minutes? I find it hard to believe, but I'd like to hear what you guys think, so do let me know in the comments. What else have we got? So, I mean, two specialist, proven, professional blood and cadaver dogs were brought in, both identifying the same evidence, same places, all surrounding the McCanns, one way or another, including that of Madeleine's favourite teddy, Cuddle Cat. Now, you see Cuddle Cat everywhere with Kate McCann for a very long period after this. Even if not before, as it's evidence, right? Because it's in the room where she's been kidnapped. So I don't know why it's not bagged and tagged like anything else would be, from what I know of forensics. But we all know that the crime scene was completely trampled over. There was delays in authorities arriving. You had friends and hotel staff all over the room contaminating the scene, which, you know, if any one of them had taken Madeleine, if that's what happened, then their evidence is going to be there anyway. But going back to Cuddle Cat, I've seen other clips in the past where they zoom in on the cat over the time period. Now, a lot of us that will be watching this, me and myself, have got children. Very, very common to have a item that is their protector. It's normally a blanket or something along those lines, but it can also be a teddy or a favourite toy. That's quite common. These items being in close proximity and always being slept with, sucked and dribbled on, you know, they get dirty, they get grimy. Any of us that have got kids that that's happened with, you're constantly having to prise the item away from the child to wash it because it stinks and it's dirty and it's gone like a dingy grey browny colour. Well, Cuddle Cat, in a lot of the footage, you can go and research it yourself. There's plenty of on podcasts just on Cuddle Cat. Not looking very dirty. Was it washed on holiday? Unlikely. Even if it was washed before the holiday, they'd already been on holiday for many days. So the likelihood is that it would have got some food on it, some chocolate on it, some dirt, and it would have already had signs of dirt and use, if you like. So for me, that's a prime piece of evidence. If Madeleine McCann goes to sleep with that every night, she's gone, the teddy's there, that is my first piece of evidence I am picking up. Tell me if I'm wrong, tell me what you'd do. The suspicion around it is that it's been washed. Now, if your child has been kidnapped or is missing, or even if you know she's dead, any of that, why would you wash it? Why would it be cleaned? That's the last smells and last piece of your daughter. Why would you clean it? Why wasn't it taken as evidence? You know, we all know that there was issues with the investigation, and there's not a lot that can be done about that now. You know, mistakes do happen. There was many on this particular occasion, but what's done is done, and what's happened has happened. So moving on from Cuddle Cat and the timelines, you've got the suspicion around Jerry McCann, as I said earlier. Eyewitness actually reported someone carrying a child matching Madeleine's description, what she was wearing, and Jerry McCann himself. There's not a lot more apart from that statement alone that holds water. But it's an eyewitness account and therefore very interesting. So both of the McCanns were listed as suspects, called acusados in Portuguese. Pronunciation may not be great. And during a lot of the Kate McCann interviews, were no comment. Now, this has been said to be on the advice of the solicitor, which is a common response. But if your child is missing and you've generally got nothing to hide, you'd be screaming. Why are you accusing me? Why are you focusing on me? Why are you not out there spending the time more productively looking for my child? I don't know if you could keep cool. I don't know if you could. I mean, loads of people say, if you say no comment, you're guilty. That's not the case. But this is your missing child, and this is the mother. She's carried this child. She went through a lot of effort to actually get pregnant with Madeleine. She would be so. I mean, it's not even that she's more important than the other two. You just wouldn't sit there saying no comment. Like it's nothing, just no comment. I don't know. No. You wouldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. There's been loads of other things that I've heard over the years where the money, they had a fundraising account where money that was gained from the public, from supporters, from sympathisers to the McCann's cause was used to fight legal battles. That doesn't sit well with me either. I mean, I'm really funny when it comes to charities and the money not going towards charity, a grey area or bubble around the transparency of where the funds are going and how they're being used and the percentages amounts. But, some of these legal proceedings were against, at the time, the lead investigator of the Portuguese investigation after he released his book, essentially insinuating that the McCanns were directly the responsible parties. And they sued him for, false accusations, I'm assuming. I felt we were in freedom of speech. But, call it what you will. They sued him for defamation of character, I think it was, and I think it was won originally, and then potentially overthrown later. Bit unsure on that one, so don't quote me. But I definitely know that there was they took legal proceedings against him after this book, and there's been other cases where people have directly accused the McCanns, and they've took them to court for defamation of character, and it's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech. If somebody wants to say, if somebody believes that you've done something, they've got the right to speak their mind, as long as they do it in an appropriate way. I've always said when it comes to, racism and homophobia and everything else where there's a discriminative factor, that as long as you're speaking to it in a, as long as you're giving information and backing up why you believe that, why you see it that way, and you're not being offensive, directly offensive, you're not being derogatory in your manner and tone. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech, and I don't understand the issue. But my problem with this is that the funds have been used from the search for Madeleine in defending their characters, where that should be really their own money, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What else have we got now? I'm not going to talk about the many suspects that have been pointed out as suspects in the case, because, you know, I like watching my crime shows, and I mean, in this particular case, there's so many that have been, you know, we're on the trail, we're on the right tracks, but the evidence is also very circumstantial. You know, the biggest one probably would be the German Buckner. You know, he had a bad record with sexual offences. His phone placed him in the vicinity of, you know, Praia da Luz, or however it's pronounced. You know, there's going to be, you know, if anybody actually looked into sex offenders in their immediate area, I think they'd all be quite shocked. I think in the area that I live in, and I think this was just a little bit of, I don't know, just one of those trivias that you just work out for a conversation. But I think I worked out that in the county I live in, there's a give or take 20, let's say 25 boroughs, you know, little district villages and little offset, you know, areas where there's population, you know, a larger population. And I think when we were doing this conversation, we'd found out that there was about 250 known sex offenders living in the immediate area, which means that there's, on average, 10 per borough. And some of these boroughs are, you know, not very big. So for the likelihood for there to be a sex offender, either 100% guaranteed or having just been unfortunately found guilty of a crime of a sexual nature, is probably quite high. And there's probably quite a high number, you know, probably quite a few. So I don't know why these individuals are being named and shamed, you know, even though if this Buckner is a known paedophile or sex offender, the worst of the worst, if it's 100% guaranteed, then yeah, it's scum of the earth. But just because you're a scum of the earth doesn't mean that you're specifically the person in this case. Yes, it's definitely a lead to investigate, 100%, you know, but there's no indication of any sex offence being committed here. There's potential for trafficking. There's possibility that a couple that can't get a baby through natural conception, or maybe through adoption, or don't want to wait, or whatever it is that have taken Madeleine. But you can't just, I mean, I don't know why you'd automatically go to a paedophile, or, you know, there's no indication of really anything happening at all, other than the British dogs, both blood and cadaver, which is dead bodies, indicating around the McCann's apartment, around the McCann's car, around Cuddle Cat. So, you know, there's no sexual crimes being mentioned here. Yes, it's an angle, but I don't know. For me, it's just trying to put a face to the issue. You know, you had that gentleman, I can't for the life of me remember his name right now, but he's on every documentary going. That was quite close to the case, especially at the start. And he could speak both languages. And I think he was a British national, but nevertheless, he was able to assist the McCanns, and did assist the McCanns, you know, and their legal party, and with reporters and things like that, and was a big help. And then it all completely turned on him because of one, I think it was a female reporter that had said, you know, she'd made a reference, I don't know if it had happened before or after, but, you know, a similar thing happened with Ian Huntley, which was another awful case in the UK, where he'd attached himself to the investigation. And it's not uncommon, you know, you'll have many forensic specialists, that psychologists, that will say that part of the thrill in this, you know, in these particular cases, in these particular types of suspects, that they like to attach themselves to the case to find out what's going on, to misdirect and mislead. So yeah, I get the investigation, but he was completely pulled apart. And, you know, I've seen it in many instances where these people are just trying to help. You know, I get what the reporter was saying. You know, I understand, you know, that it was a bit like, well, you know, you're just giving up your free time and blah, blah, blah. But maybe that was his 5 minutes in the spotlight. Maybe he wanted to have 5 minutes in the spotlight. You know, most of the time when we do things that are, you know, for other people, there's very few selfless good deeds out there, truly selfless. There's normally some ulterior motive. I like to say myself that that's not the case with me. I generally do as much good and as nice for people as I possibly can. But even if it makes you feel good, that's a motive. That's a reason for it. So, I mean, I don't know. There's been so many different sightings, so many different countries, so many different suspects, and none of it really holds much water, or not that we've seen anyway. You know, there's been very, very little trail evidence, new information over the entire case. So for me, it's all a bit up in the air, I'm afraid. Again, you know, this is not one or two things. This is, you know, 10 to 20 things stacking up, and it all goes back to one place. And if it all goes back to one place, then that's, you know, there's a reason for those suspicions. You know, what else is there? You know, it's crazy. There was a statement about this, the locked window in the child's room. And then I'm sure in an interview it was caught that Jerry McCann had at one point said it was locked. And at one point during one of the checks, he'd opened it, or it was open. You know, and I understand you'd be a bit confused, and, you know, but they do say that lies are harder to remember and that the truth is easy to roll off the tongue. You know, I don't know, I've never felt great about this case, but personally, you know, the biggest conspiracy around the McCanns and this particular case is that they gave sedatives to the children, and there was a solidifying fact. Well, I say fact, but, you know, high suspicion in terms of this is that right after the alarm had been raised, you know, commotion, noise, even when the police arrived, the twins remained asleep. And I think the issue behind that is that with all of the noise and disturbance, you know, I mean, would you grab your other children and, you know, as a protective measure? I don't know. It's one of those on that one, but the point is that the kids were still asleep for a large part of the initial alarm of Madeleine being missing, and the suspicion arose around that they had been given sedatives when they left to go for the restaurant, most likely either Calpol or an antihistamine of sorts. There's no definitive answers there. And I don't think there was any blood work done on the children, on the twins. For me as an investigator, I would be demanding a warrant or whatever the procedure is in Portugal, similar to the UK, America, or whatever, to get blood work off the children. I mean, I don't know if that's a thing that you'd think of first of all. I mean, it wasn't an allegation or a suspicion that was mentioned straight off the bat. But I don't know, as an investigator, would you find that weird that, you know, this commotion's been going on for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, and that the two babies are still fast asleep? Not even, you know, just nothing. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But it would have been nice to have seen some blood work to rule that out. But like I said earlier about there being no obvious sex angle, so would there be an initial, oh, the parents have drugged the children? Would that come into it? Possibly not. So, but that's a shame nevertheless. Over the years, I don't know. I mean, I've always gone back to the McCanns, one way or another. And like I said earlier, I don't think that they killed Madeleine. I don't think that's the case at all. That being said, I don't think Madeleine McCann left that apartment alive. What I think is the most likely, for me, what I think it may have happened is that whether they were given sedatives or not is irrelevant at this particular point. But one of the reasons why you need to be in the vicinity of your children is if they have an allergic reaction, seizure, choking. You know, there's a number of different things other than just external threats. So, is it possible that one of 2 or 3 instances has occurred? Madeleine's woke up. She's gone into the living room, maybe looking for mum and dad, maybe just to play. Maybe she's climbed on the sofa. Maybe she's accidentally fallen off and banged her head, which would answer for the blood. Because that's the key bit for me with this one, is the blood dog. The cadaver dog, yeah, deaf, but the blood dog. What would cause blood? You know, it's not like I believe that either of the parents have gone in there and battered Madeleine. That's not the case at all. So, and it was all around the sofa area. So I wonder whether Madeleine has been messing about. She's only a 3-year-old toddler. Whether she's been playing on the sofa and fallen, hit her head, caused a bleed. As simple as that. The McCanns, or one of the McCanns, Kate McCann, whoever, even one of the friends comes back. Madeleine's on the floor. She's bleeding. She's not responsive. There's panic sets in. They're all medical professionals. None of them want to be held liable or have any defamation of character, you know, in their professions. That, one, they've left their children unattended whilst they go drinking and partying across the way. Because if they'd been in there and Madeleine had woke up, that occurrence wouldn't have happened, right? So, for me, that's probably the most likely narrative that I can come up with. And until the blood dog, I'd always said that she, in my eyes, died in the apartment. So, and then you have obviously the aftermath. So it's possible that either the parents or, I mean, both parents would have to be aware of what was happening to being on it. And it's very possible that the rest of the party, or, you know, other members of the larger party, were also aware of the potential true events, and that they've either got rid of the, you know, moved the body somewhere. You know, we all do things in panic. You know, none of us want to get in trouble for anything, especially if we're generally a good person, and have made a mistake that's led to another mistake that's led to another mistake that could put you in jail. You know, both medical professionals, you know, they've got a lot to lose. It just seems more plausible. So, and then it comes, you know, the kidnapping. You know, it's initially she's been kidnapped. Well, why? If you're a kidnapper, now you'd have to be pretty good, pretty seasoned professional to leave no trace of, you know, no obvious trace evidence, no signs of forced entry, and to go and evade any type of alert over a 17-year period. Why would you take the eldest child? Most kidnappers would, let's say it was a kidnapping, They would have probably studied the McCanns, their habits, the children in detail and their behaviour. There was a lot of information where the name was booked in a block in the registrar for the restaurant, so somebody could have seen that, or somebody could have had somebody on the inside. But why would you go after the eldest child? That would cause you the most problems. Not only that, but you would have probably done, you'd have probably been in close proximity and studied both the parents, the children, the interaction. And you'd probably notice, because it's quite obvious, Madeleine's very, very rare eye. Now, that's just another marker. This is one of very few people in the world that have got this eye deformality, if you like, or disorder, whichever. But that makes her a very clearly identifiable target. So, I mean, if you didn't know, but I would like to think that if somebody is going to stage one of the best kidnappings out there, that they would probably have seen the deformity of the eye and thought, that's probably not the best target. But, I don't know. I'd love to hear you guys' comments. But for me, either you take all of the children. If it's trafficking, you take all the children, right? If it's any of the other kidnapping scenarios, why wouldn't you take one of the younger ones that wouldn't be able to identify you? They can't talk, they can't, the memory is likely to go by the time that they're of age to be able to do that. And how accountable would it really be in a court of law? So for me, it would either be all of them, or either one or both of the twins, if you were going to pick and switch. If there was only one person, then that would make sense as to only why one was taken. But again, why would you not take one of the babies? The baby that will never, they'll wake up tomorrow, they might have a bit of a whinge and a moan, but after 24 hours, whoever's looking after them, feeding them, changing them, giving them love, care, whatever, they're happy. So the kidnapping angle for me is really difficult to believe. It's also hard to believe that, as tragic as it would be if Madeleine did accidentally die, and the parents covering it up. I mean, the loss of a child must be one of the most, or the most worst thing on this planet. It's unnatural, and it would destroy you, it would eat you up inside. So that's my particular theory, because it's the only one for me that makes the most logical sense, and that's how I work, that's how my brain focuses and how it just puts things together. And then you've got all of the other suspicions as well. So Madeleine McCann is one of thousands of children, both in Britain, Portugal, and globally, that are kidnapped or go missing every single year. Probably hundreds, maybe even thousands a day. What made, and I'm not saying that she's not special, every child, every life is special. But in this particular instance, for what I'm trying to say is, why was Madeleine McCann at that time so special? Why was she so special to get the attention, global attention of the world press? The attention of the British Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, at the time, and the Pope. Now, for me, that is just, the Pope has got a religious constituents of about 1 billion people. A lot which will be children. A lot that would have been kidnapped or gone missing in close proximity to Madeleine. What made her so special? Now, I've got other podcasts to do, And I will be doing one on the Catholic Church, Rome, the Vatican, and secrets and things like that. And I have mentioned them in my book in separate events, but the whole point of this podcast is to bring my book to life for you to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So when it comes to the Vatican, they've got the Vatican Archives, one of the most secretive places that's had very few eyes witness. If the relics, the scripture, the stuff they have in miles of shelving in the Vatican Archives below the Vatican, if that proved religion, wouldn't it be in a museum? Wouldn't it be displayed to the world? Wouldn't we see it? So some of the high-ranking officials in Catholicism within the Vatican, the Pope, the cardinals, they live better than a lot of people, and yet a lot of their constituents are suffering, and they're one of the wealthiest organisations and charity at that. For me, the Vatican is definitely not what it seems. That's not to disgrace the Catholicism religion in total, but I think that the Vatican is a secret society of sorts. I think that they, I call them the keepers or the secret holders. I think that they have got information in that archive that, well, would answer or give a lot of information that that the powers to be, the elites, whoever, don't want us to see at all. I don't know. But I don't know why the Pope's involved in this particular case. I don't understand what benefit he gets or he got from involving himself in the case. And the same with Gordon Brown. I don't see, maybe some voters that sympathetically were like, oh, he's a really good person. But what about all the other children? I don't know. It's a very, very weird case. And in many cases, there isn't suspicions, against the parents. But all the evidence, as little as it is, even the circumstantial evidence, it all leads back to the same place. And if you've got a centralised point, for me, that's not great. There's another case that I talk about in the book on a little 6-year-old girl in Boulder, Colorado, called JonBenet Ramsey. Another very, very odd kidnapping, suspicion, murder case that's unresolved to this day. Again, everything leading back to the parents, one way or another. Loads of suspects, not a great deal of usable or evidence to go on. A contaminated crime scene, mistakes made by the police, similar to Portugal. Very, very similar, unfortunately, a tragic ending, but a very suspicious potential cover-up from a potential accident, once again, with the parents being very up there in as a high possible suspects. But I'll do another podcast on JonBenet Ramsey as well, because that's another one that I feel a lot on. But I'll leave that there for today. I've said my piece. And at the end of it, the tragic thing is that this little girl is missing. You can't even say likely dead. There's that little evidence. The only thing that would suggest that as as a more likely event is that the blood dog and the cadaver dog both identified the same evidence, same places, same locations, same items, etc. So, but I don't think we'll ever get a conclusion for Madeleine, and I think that's probably the saddest thing of all. But what I want to leave you on is something that I've touched on a couple of areas. As tragic as it is, even if the McCanns weren't involved, even if it was a kidnapping, regardless of who, what, where or why, answer me this. Why are the McCanns not held responsible for leaving their children, infant children, unattended by their own word of mouth several times in Portugal or Britain? Why have they not been charged with the least of neglect? Why were the twins not immediately removed from their custody by social services and British officials when they returned home? Please tell me in the comments your thoughts on this. I feel for the loss of the child. If they are completely innocent of anything else, I sympathise deeply. But why have you not been punished for leaving your children unattended? Hope you've enjoyed the episode, guys. If you can subscribe and give us a like, share, I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you for the next one. Take care.
Thanks for watching the One Opinion in 8 Billion podcast. The truth is rarely simple, but the questions are always worth asking. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and join the conversation, because the biggest questions in life deserve to be explored.